Okay, it's 2:15, so we should get started. People are still kind of coming in. I'd like to welcome everyone to the overview of AppV 5.0 breakout session. My name's Asim Kohli. I'm a program manager on the AppV team. I actually started on the AppV team in early 2007, so that would put me around the 4.2 timeframe for those who have been using AppV for that long. Before I dive into the material, I'd like to take a gauge of the audience. How many folks here are completely new to AppV? Raise your hands. Okay. All right, cool. A few people. And of those people who currently do use AppV, how many use our server? All right. And how many use Config Manager? Yes. Okay. Awesome. For the folks who are new, I'll try to give a pretty broad overview at the beginning to give you some context into some of the new features that we're providing in 5.0. For the folks who have been with us through it thick and thin, I'll talk more about the deep dive. We'll do some demos, and I'll give you the key differences between 5.0 and previous versions of AppV. So the session agenda. First and foremost, AppV 5.0. What I want to give you guys is an overview of what our vision was as we were building and designing AppV 5.0. And then I'll talk about some of the key differences up front so you can get that information right away. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about how to manage 5.0. And we made a lot of big improvements in our management experience. And so you'll see that especially through our new server UI. Virtual application connections, the next generation of dynamic suite composition. In the 3 days I've been here, by far this is the topic I've gotten the most questions about. You know what I'm talking about, right? People are like, what's going on with DSC? And we've made some big improvements to DSC, and you'll see that in a demo as well. Virtual application extensions, so managing virtual application interactions. This is a new feature in 5.0. We're going to talk about how virtual applications can now be interoperable with the native operating system, with native applications. And we'll talk about how that provides a new level of flexibility in managing and using virtual applications. And last but not least, VDI. For folks who have used our shared cache with 4.6, we've now gone to the next generation of that, which is now our shared content store. And I'll talk about not only how you can fit that into your VDI environment, but how you can easily manage that in a seamless fashion. One thing you may notice I don't have on the agenda is AppV 5.0 integration with Config Manager. We can't, unfortunately, give you any information on that right now. I can tell you we are working very, very closely with the Config Manager team, and we will have something to announce pretty soon. But the meat of this talk will still be good. We'll still have the same concepts, the same feature sets. So what I hope you'll see here is that a lot of the features that, even though we're using the server UI, they'll translate across Config Manager or whatever software deployment mechanism you may be using. So a quick trip down memory lane. For those who are new to AppV, AppV is actually based out of an acquisition of Softricity in 2006. Softricity is a company based out of Boston. And in fact, the AppV team today is actually based out of Cambridge, Massachusetts. That's where I'm from and the folks from our team. In 2008, we released AppV 4.5, which is really our scale release. It was more about how to do distributed deployments. In 2010, we released 4.6, which is about 64-bit support, Office 2010, and our support for Windows 7. Our most recent release has been 4.6 SP1, which is really about major improvements to our sequencer workflow. For folks who are new, the sequencer is the tool that actually takes a native application and turns it into a virtual application. We got a lot of feedback on this tool. We incorporated that. We added some new features like package accelerators, which really makes it dead simple and really fast to make virtual applications. If you were at the session earlier today, my colleague Derek actually gave a session on server at V. You can now actually virtualize server applications with server at V 1.0 as part of VMM, so you can manage server applications. And much like on the desktop, server virtualization allows you to separate the actual application from configuration and allows you to deploy your server apps in a data center in a much more streamlined fashion. So if you didn't have a chance to check out that talk, definitely check out the recording. And what we're here for is 5.0, which is now actually out in beta. So first, let's talk about some pillars about how we designed 5.0, the integrated platform. And what do we mean by integrated platform? Well, one of the things we realized is that virtual applications have a lot of benefits, but they also have to have the benefits of native applications. They need to work like your traditional native Windows applications in many ways. And with that kind of guidepost in mind, we realized that we needed to change some of the technical underpinnings of AppV to make that work. For example, you'll see that with 5.0, we actually use NTFS as our file system. We don't use a proprietary file system. So what's the benefit of that? For example, if you try to use a virus scanner with 4.5 or 4.6, you have to kind of go through some series of steps to make that happen. With 5.0, it just works because your virtual files are all on NTFS, just like any other native application. Flexible virtualization. We want to give you as many options as you can to get your virtual applications working. And a lot of times we think of that as, I just need to get my app sequenced. But that also means, once it's sequenced, that I can get all of the feature sets, the rich feature set I had of that application natively to work virtually. And I'll talk about virtual applications sharing the same environment, which is connection groups. We'll also talk about integration with the operating system. And I also want to touch upon one thing. I'm talking about a lot of new feature sets, a lot of new formats, and I can see on some people's faces, they're going to say, how do I migrate my existing AppV investments to this? And I want to let you know that as we designed 5.0, we kept that at the forefront of our minds. In fact, we actually have a session on migration tomorrow. My colleague Dilip will be giving that. And so with 5.0, we allow you to keep all the assets, all the sequencings that you've done for 4.5 and 4.6, and convert them directly to 5.0 to take advantage of the new package format. We'll also talk about coexistence, meaning that you can actually run a 4.6 client and a 5.0 client on the same machine and actually stage your deployment. So as your apps come online and as you want to move to 5.0, you can do that transition at your own pace. Last but not least, powerful management. And when we say powerful management, we also want to emphasize simple management. We really tried to make the common tasks, the common scenarios, really easy. And for those of you who want to do more advanced tasks, make that more approachable. We'll talk about the new web-based management interface. I'll also talk about VDI and how that's much easier to manage. And also touch on PowerShell scripting. For those of you who have used SFT MIME, we've now moved to PowerShell. We actually have an entire session on PowerShell and automating at V5.0 tomorrow. My colleague Dylan, Karan Dylan, will be doing that talk. So I think this is a slide a lot of people want to see before we get into the demos, which is what is the difference between 4.6 and 5.0. So the first one is the Q drive. This is a great question I've been getting for at least 2 or 3 years at MMS. What's up with that Q drive? I'm very proud to announce there is no Q drive anymore. I thought that might get some applause. Another one I get is the 4 gig limit. We got a lot of customers that say, I've got a package like even MSDN that just goes way beyond 4 gigs, even with compression. There is no 4 gigabyte limit anymore. Right? Isolated from local applications. This is great. This is one of the great value propositions of AppV. But we're also providing ways for you to bend the rules of isolation so that applications can register virtual subsystems with the operating system. And I'll show you a demo of how this is done. Share middleware with dynamic suite composition. we have virtual application connections now. One of the big things we realize here is that we can go beyond just suiting middleware and plugins. We can now actually do app-to-app connections. Read-only shared cache for VDI and RDS. The big emphasis there is read-only. I've had some folks come up to me today and say, we really love that shared cache and we can use it in VDI, but it's read-only and it's a little harder to update. So we now have a shared content store that you can actually update easily, and I'll show you a demo of how that happens. Limited command line scripting, SFT MIME support. I bet you a lot of you are familiar. That's our command line utility for automating the client and the sequencer. We now have a PowerShell workflow that covers not only the sequencer and the client, but for the first time, you can actually automate with PowerShell the entire server experience as well. Install management console. You guys have seen that. We actually have a web-based management console that's Silverlight-based. You can use in the browser. And enough of me talking about it. I think we should take it out for a test drive. So let's switch over. And this is our new server management console that's based in Silverlight. What you can see here is the overview page. And you can actually click on these and get various information. And these are also quick links to various things. What I want you to focus on actually is this navigation menu here. You can see here, first thing, obviously, when you try out at v50 beta, you want to set up administrators. All that basic stuff is there. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but just let you know, you can do that using AD groups. You can also manage all your publishing servers. So distributed deployments is a key value proposition of application virtualization. And when you install the management server, you also have the option of installing a publishing server. Now, in the case of this demo, I've actually installed that on the same machine. And when I do that, it automatically gets registered here. But you probably have publishing servers that you need distributed across your entire enterprise. You can actually go ahead and easily do that, install the publishing server role, which is we'll just build on top of IIS. And then you can register those servers here by just going over here, register a new server, give it the name of the server, go ahead and add it, and it shows up. One thing I do want to mention, actually, before you go out and try the beta, is that you'll notice here that the server has a last publishing attempt. So let me talk a little bit about the architecture. So we have a management server where you import packages and you manipulate all your package configuration. The publishing servers will sync up to the management server and pull down information, then send it down to the users that need it. Now, by default, that metadata refresh happens every 10 minutes. So what I would advise is when you go and try the beta for the first time in your lab, set that default to something other than 10 minutes. In the example here, I've got it running every 10 seconds. I wouldn't do that in production. But one of the things you'll see is, oh, I've got all my packages on my management server, and I do a publishing refresh, and nothing happens. It's because the servers are pinging the management server every 10 minutes. So there's a simple configuration that you can set. It's in our documentation. I just want to make sure everyone's out there before people start saying, hey, why isn't publishing refresh working? It's working. Just got to configure it. So that's our servers. And this is our new package view. So you can see a list of packages that I've already added to this console. One of the things we've always heard is, I've got a lot of packages, and I need to be able to get access to them quickly. We have search support, so you can go ahead and simply search for packages. We'll bring them up. On top of that, we have advanced filtering, so you can search by applications, deployment status, really rich search in our console. When you select a package, you'll see that on the bottom of the screen, we give you a nice preview pane. It shows you what applications are in the package, who has access, and what connection groups this package is in. And I'll talk more about connection groups in a little bit. To manipulate a package, you have several methods, actually. One is to simply right-click, and you can do operations like unpublishing, deleting a package, updating a package. You can also go through these quick links down here. And so one of them you'll probably use quite a bit is just entitling a package. So you'll see this window comes up below, and you can see I already have some groups here. And I can just type in a new group, let's say. So let's say domain users. And you can see it'll check against AD, and then I can hit grant access, and it'll go through, and you're set to go. You're also probably wondering, okay, how do I get these packages even into the system? How does that work? So you click up here to add or upgrade packages. And what we support in AppV is streaming your packages via HTTP or HTTPS, or SMB, which is file streaming. And you can actually go ahead and input the path to the streaming server, and we'll just use that by default. So if you're using HTTP, you just type in, HTTP, whichever package. We also support browse, so you can just browse for files as you need them. I'll do a quick little example. So I know I have a server, so I'll say, let's see, beyond compare, I think. I pointed to an @v file. I hit add. It's added, and I can see it down here, and you're good to go. Now, in this case, I had it imported in from a streaming location, which was an SMB server. But on the client, much like if you've used our application source root and all that before, we have that functionality on the client, so you can override that and stream from whatever location is closest to you. Now, you may have noticed I use an @v file. You're wondering, where did my SFT file go? Let me take a few minutes and talk about packaging in AppV 5.0. So our sequencer experience in AppV 5.0 is largely unchanged. We've brought over all the improvements that we made in 4.6 SP1. You'll have them in 5.0. But we are using a new package file format, and that's part of the reason why you have no more 4 gig limit. It's also an open format, so you can go ahead and actually open it up, and hopefully, third parties will build tools to do more interesting things on top of the file format. As I mentioned, we do support conversion of packages from 4.5 or 4.6. We have a package converter tool, which we'll talk about in the migration session tomorrow in more detail. It's a PowerShell-based tool. It allows you to go ahead and batch convert all your packages, or you can convert them one-off and then use coexistence as you migrate. So that's packaging. Let me show you exactly what comes out of the sequencer when you create a package. And you can see here. So here's my @v file. That's a file that is pretty much self-contained. You can just use this. As you can see, when I imported the package in, all the configuration is actually embedded right here. So you can just use that. We also still have our MSIs. I know a lot of folks use our MSI option with other software distribution platforms, as well as config manager. You'll still have that. And you'll also notice these 2 new files. One is called a deployment config, and one is called a user config. And you'll also notice the absence of OSD files. OSD files will no longer exist in 5.0. You actually don't have to use them. And in fact, these configuration files that you see here are completely optional. But you might be wondering, well, what do these configuration files do? Let me explain. So these configuration files are similar to OSDs in that they contain all the properties that you may see in an OSD file. So all our virtual subsystems. If you need a place to add or modify scripts, you would do it in these files into a deployment configuration or a user configuration file. As you see, there's also 2 types. I'll explain those differences in a moment, but you can use either or none of them. And obviously, the goal here is you don't have to make any modifications to your package. You don't have to go back to the sequencer. If you need to make a configuration or runtime change, you can use one of these files. So deployment and user configuration. So how does this work? So there's really 3 things you need to know here. So for most applications, when you sequence an application, you won't have to do anything to it. It will just work. And for that case, all you need to do is just use your @v file and import it into the console or put it on a share and stream, and you're good to go. But in some cases, applications need a little extra TLC, right? They need a script. They may need some sort of registry setting modification to get them working as a native application would. And so that's really where deployment configuration comes in. Deployment configuration is a file that you apply to a package, much like you have one set of OSDs that you apply to a package. And any changes you make in that file will get applied to anyone who uses that package. So this is where you would make changes for something that every user would need just to get up and running with the package. And again, there's only one of these files per package, whereas OSD files, you had many different files for each application. One package, one file. The third type of configuration is a little more advanced, and that's a situation where I need to make some configuration change for a package, but I need to make it for a specific user. So kind of a classical example I've heard is an enterprise that has an engineering group and a finance group. And they are using a suite of applications that are all in one package, but the engineering group doesn't only needs specific applications and it needs specific shortcuts, and the finance group needs specific applications and specific shortcuts. And in the past, what ends up happening is you have to maintain two separate versions of the package, separate metadata. With user configuration, you have one package, but you can have multiple configuration files. So one package, multiple configuration files. So it simplifies the experience and allows you to scale across a large number of different groups who have different requirements for their configuration of a package. And so let me show you how that would work in practice. So I have a package here. It's Adobe Reader. And if I want to access that deployment configuration, that kind of default configuration that every user gets when they go ahead and use that package, I can just go right-click and say Edit Default. Sorry. Wrong button. All right. Let me show you how I got there. So I right-click, and what you do is just hit Edit Default Configuration. And here you'll see below, you'll see a set of options. You'll see applications that you can manipulate, shortcuts which you can manipulate, you can view different file types, and then there's advanced. So advanced is really where if you want to go and make some change that's not available in our UI, you just export that file. And I'll show you how that works a little later. But for the most commonly used tasks, like shortcuts and applications, we made a UI for that. And so you can see here in this particular package, I have a shortcut for the desktop as well as the start menu. And what I'm going to do here is actually say for a specific user, I want only a shortcut in the start menu. It's a simple example, but I think it illustrates the feature. So I don't want to use deployment configuration for that or the default configuration because that will apply to every single user. What I want to do is target a specific user group. So what I do is actually go to the AD access, and I can go and select a custom configuration and hit Edit. And you can see here I've got all my shortcuts, but I said, I really don't need this shortcut, so I'm just going to remove it. I really don't need this shortcut. I'll go ahead and remove it. And now this guy will only have a shortcut on the desktop. So I'll go ahead and close. And so how do these changes take effect? Well, it's publishing refresh. So the client will go and talk to our server, get a metadata update. So let's go see how that works. So let me switch. So this is our client. So this is our new client UI, which again kind of takes from the Windows 8 Metro style. And you can see this client has a shortcut on the desktop. Oops. Didn't mean to bring that up. There's a shortcut on the desktop, and he's got a shortcut up here in the start menu. But we don't want this user group to have that shortcut. So what we do is we just initiate a publishing refresh. It's going and talking to the server. It's asking for new updates. I know the back and forth thing. It's a little, it's Metro. So we still have our shortcut on the desktop, but you can see here our shortcut in the start menu is gone. And just to be complete so you guys know I'm not ripping you off, we have a second client here who also I've done a publishing refresh for. We still have the shortcut here, and we still got the shortcut in the start menu. So again, different configurations for different user groups, really easy. You might be asking yourself, okay, I can make all these configurations. What if I made a mistake? How do I go back? Excellent question. If we go back to our server, we can go hit Edit, go back to our default, close, and then go back to our client. Just initiate another publishing refresh. It'll go off, ask the server, hey, any updates? We'll see that we have a new configuration file, and our shortcut's back. So pretty straightforward, but really powerful. So as a recap of what we've seen so far, kind of been doing a rolling demo of our server interface, again, browser-based. Easy to manage the lifecycle of a package. Adding packages is easy. Publishing them, unpublishing them, removing them, straightforward. Dynamic configuration. If there's anything you remember, it's 2 files. Deployment config, user config. Deployment config, you can only have 1 per package. User config, you can have as many as you like. And PowerShell. Now, I didn't show you any PowerShell, but actually, in many ways, literally, PowerShell is the heart of everything we do in v5.0. Everything you saw here can be scripted through PowerShell and automated. And again, we have a session tomorrow that shows you how to do that. But just to remind you, PowerShell is under the hood of everything you just saw. So let's talk about virtualization. When we talk about flexible virtualization and that promise that we deliver in 5.0, we talk about virtualizing a wide range of business applications. And when we went and looked at the customer feedback and the data about the types of applications and the types of issues customers are hitting, we really kind of saw 3 tiers of applications. The first ones are applications that are pretty simple. They're standalone, they don't have any dependencies, they have pretty well-defined behavior, and they've been good candidates for virtualization. And the feedback we get is, those applications, great. I can turn them into virtual applications, no problem. They work just like native applications. The second set of applications tend to have a few more dependencies or need to be configured in some way, like I said, with a script or with a registry modification. Now, we've developed the tools over the years to go and get those applications virtualized and working in a native manner. So those seem to be fine. But then there's this third group of applications. And these are applications that you very well could sequence, but when you try to use them, they have very complex interactions with other applications and with the operating system. And so what ends up happening, and the truth of the matter is, the feedback is, a lot of customers, even though they could actually literally virtualize it, they choose to install natively because they don't get the full feature set that they get when they run the application natively. And so that's really the problem. That's really those 2 red bubbles. That's what we've really been focusing on in 5.0, is to give you the flexibility to get those applications not only just virtualized, but running like a native application. And so one of the ways that we do that is really with virtual application connections. Virtual application connections, for those who are new to AppV, is a way for an application or a set of applications to run in the same virtual environment or the same bubble. So those applications are no longer actually isolated from each other. Now, what benefit is that? Well, it's really twofold. Number one, those applications can now work together as they would like natively. So a lot of applications, for example, software that has various plugins, those pieces of software need to be able to communicate, and those applications can work even though they won't be isolated from each other. They'll still be isolated from the operating system and other virtual applications. The other big thing is it simplifies updates. So obviously, if you have something like Java and you have it in 20 different applications and you embed Java in every single application, when the time comes to update Java, you have 20 apps to update, which I don't think anyone in this room wants to do. Obviously, with virtual application connection, and you had the same thing with dynamic suite composition previously, you can actually have Java outside of the package, and then at runtime, combine them in the virtual environment using connections. So that way, when it comes time to update Java, it's a piece of cake, right? You update once, and then you apply. Straightforward. What I want to show is how virtual applications connections work in 5.0. For those who don't have experience with 4.5 and 4.6, to manage virtual application connections, or at that time, dynamic suite composition required essentially going into OSD files, which are these XML files, figuring out which application was the primary one, which ones were dependent, and then sort of linking them together. It's a much different experience in 5.0. So first, let's go to the server. And what I want to show is Visio and Office. These are two applications. They're separate. They run isolated. But a lot of times, they need to work together. And so if we go to the client, I'll illustrate this typical problem. So I'll go ahead and bring up Word. As that comes up. And so I'm an end user. I've got my Word document open, and I have this document I created with this really super complex diagram that I need to edit. Obviously, it's just really simple in this case. But I click on it, and I right-click, and I say, oh, yeah, Visio, oh, I can't do anything. Why? It's because these applications usually talk between using COM or something, so Word can talk to Visio and say, hey, allow me to edit this Visio diagram, right? So what's the solution to this? This is a problem that virtual application connections can solve. So I'll go ahead and go back to our server. So we need to figure out how do we link these packages together. So what you'll see at the top here is I have another tab called App Connection Groups. And you see I don't have any connection groups here, but I'm going to create one. So I'll go to Add Connection Groups, and I'll give it a name. So in this case, I'll say Office Visio. You can see it's V1. It's currently unpublished. And now I need to put some packages in this group. And quite literally, what the server is doing in the back end is actually creating an XML document. So like I said before, in 4.6, you'd have to take the OSD files and manipulate the XML. What we've done now is actually created basically a separate container. It's a separate document that you can use that actually says, OK, here's my name of my connection group. Here are the packages in it. And then go apply it to the client. And so what I'm showing you here is on the server. You could actually do this very easily through PowerShell, or you can create these documents on yourself or through whatever software distribution tool you're using, and then apply that directly to the client. But in the case of the server, we made it pretty simple. So you can see your package library down here. And what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and select the packages I want, in this case, Office and Visio. You'll notice here, you'll see these arrows and these numbers 0, 1, and this is ordering. Why do we have this ordering? Well, when you put two applications in the same virtual environment, they're no longer isolated, right? So there's a potential for conflicts. So let's say Office and Visio use a similar or the same reg key. Who wins? Well, what I'm saying here is Office will win, right? So this is just showing you the order of precedence. Typically, we don't think you'll have to use this, but if you do, you know that the advanced feature is there. The other thing you'll notice up at the top of the screen here is add package access to group access. So when you create a connection group, we don't automatically just transfer the entitlements of the individual packages to the connection group. Why did we do that? Because we don't want to have situations where, as an IT admin, you're like, why did this happen? I don't know, right? Like you have these secondary or tertiary effects where you're like, why did this user get this connection group? But at the same time, we also realize that for a lot of times, the people who have access to the package want access to the connection group. So this checkbox will migrate those settings over. But in general, entitlements are completely separate. So you could import a bunch of packages, not have them entitled to anyone, and then only have the connection group that contains the packages entitled to them. And what that does is ensures that people only use those packages in a connection group. So what I'll go ahead and do is just select that, hit apply. My packages are in there. You can see that it looked at the individual packages and said these packages are assigned to group 1, so I'll make the connection group assigned to group 1. And then all I have to do is hit publish. And now when I go over to my client, I initiated publishing refresh. And again, what the server has done is created that document that describes the connection group. It's getting pushed down to the client. Didn't seem to take. And the reason it didn't take is because my Office package is still running. So to use connection groups, you have to actually shut down all the individual packages. you'll get a quick bonus or quick preview of PowerShell. One of the things you can do to shut down a package is actually go ahead and use PowerShell. So I can actually get the list of packages currently running on my system. And then once I have it, I can actually programmatically shut down that application. So now you can see that the package is no longer in use. You can see here. So let's go try that, do that publishing refresh again. And now it's going to go talk to the client, to the server, pull down our data. Should take a couple of seconds. Okay, you see that this was updated. So we have our list of packages, and now we have a connection group called Office Visio. Much simpler than editing OSD files. So just to make sure that, in fact, this does work, and I'm not ripping you guys off here. So let me bring up Word. This will take a little while. While Word is coming up, I actually do want to show you what else you can do on the server. You can obviously update these connection groups and add packages to them dynamically as you need it. You can also create new versions of connection groups easily. So if I wanted to create a new version, I could just say copy as new version. I get a new version. Let's say I don't want to publish it yet, but it's v2. And I can go and edit it. And let's say I wanted to add Adobe Reader for whatever reason. Again, you can go and change the order of these packages. Hit apply, close. And then you have a new version of a package, or a connection group for a set of packages. And then obviously, to complete the lifecycle, you can delete them. Again, very simple. Let's go back to our client. You can see Word is now up. I'm going to load up my Visio document. Takes a few seconds. Here it comes. It's on the desktop. So now I'm going to go and try and actually edit this diagram. The two applications should be in the same virtual environment. So when that right click, sorry, didn't hit that. When that comes up, and we now have an edit link. So we know that the connection group is working. And I can go ahead, actually hit and go ahead, edit it, and get my work done. So this is really powerful stuff, right? So you can go and easily dynamically get applications to connect to each other. The biggest thing I can stress is it's very easy to do on the server side. And it's also going to be very easy to do if you're not using our server. If you end up using a third-party tool, again, we expose all of this stuff through PowerShell, so you can easily build tools to kind of do whatever scenario makes sense for you, but in a very strict and programmatic way, in a less error-prone way. So virtual application connections. So obviously, I've shown you it's very simple to use on the server. The big thing I wanted you to take from this is that last point. Applications and plugins, you could do it in DSC, you can do it with connection groups. Applications and middleware, same thing. But applications and other applications. And that's where we really try to get into those applications that we saw in red in the slide previously. Those applications that you can virtualize, but they just need to work with another application. This is where virtual application connections can help you with that problem. So this is kind of the cousin, I like to think of virtual application connection. That's virtual application extension. What is an extension point? So an extension point is a virtual subsystem that we can register with the native operating system. So when you sequence an application, what the sequencer will now do is see, oh, you have a program that's registering various COM DLLs with the operating system. Or you've got something that's registering a mail protocol handler with the system. We pick that up, and we put it inside the package. And then when you run that package on the client, the native operating system can see it. So you think of like an application in a bubble. You can sort of think as virtual application extension points as little sort of pipes into that bubble, where in a very systematic way, in a very specific channel, the native operating system can see it, and other native applications can see it, right? And that's really powerful. So the native to virtual ability of extension points gives that global visibility. You could also have other virtual applications see another virtual application through a specific extension point. So the applications could still remain isolated, but they could still talk to each other. And so when we talk about supported subsystems, two of them you'll know, shortcuts and file type associations. They're extension points. They register with the operating system. We'll talk about app path. URL protocols, I'm going to show you a demo of how you can configure and manipulate the URL protocol to have the default mail to for an email client, software clients, COM. It's all there. There's a lot of documentation around this. But extension points are a very systematic way of getting applications to talk with the native system and with other virtual applications. So I'll do a quick demonstration. So the first thing I want to emphasize is that with virtual application extensions, you really don't have to do anything. You get a lot for free. So when you sequence an application, we'll pick up all those extension points and register them automatically. And so for example, a classic one is I need Outlook to be my default email client when I go click on a link for like a mail to link, right? So I've sequenced an application, Office, and now I have this. This is the MMS registration website, by the way. And I want to go and say, click Contact Us. When I hit that, you can see Outlook automatically sees that. I didn't have to do anything. The extension point is already there. And in this case, I'm not going to go and launch Outlook. But you see that it just works. OK. You're like, OK, Asim, that's cool, whatever. How do I go and manipulate this, right? So let's talk about the mechanics of how this actually happens. So this is kind of an interesting example. What I'm going to do is actually turn off that URL protocol handler. And I'm going to turn off some other subsystems too. So what I'll do is go back to our server. And again, everything I'm doing here, you could do outside the server as well. What I'll go to is my packages. Go to Microsoft Office. And I'll right-click and go to edit that default configuration. Because this is a change I want to make to every single user, not a specific user, so I'll use that default configuration. And this is where I'll go to that Advanced tab. And when you want to manipulate an extension point or a subsystem, there's really two ways you can go about doing that. One is you can actually go ahead and just click Export Configuration. And that will give you an XML file that you can start working with. And it will list all of our subsystems. And we document how all this looks. And you can use that as a starting point to make configurations. You can do that for extension points. You can also do that for scripts. So this is a great place to kind of start. The other thing you can do is, in case you're not using our servers, as I mentioned before, we output these files. And the XML file you'll see is all entirely commented. So you can find the section for the extension point you're interested in and make the right manipulations. So in this case, what I did was I actually just exported a file already. And I'll bring it up here. And this is pretty straightforward XML. You can see here, for example, I've minimized this, but we list all the applications in the package. You can turn these on or off. Same thing with file type associations. We have a whole set of file types. In this one, what I've done here is I've actually only done the .docx one. So for those who are interested, here's the .docx. We tell it what shell commands we want. Again, the sequencer writes all this, so you're not expected to go and somehow magically come up with this, but it's there for you. The one we're interested in is this URL protocols. And you can see here, we have this mail to, and this comes for free with a sequencer. But what if I wanted to make a change to this? How do I do that, right? Simple. You can just simply remove those items from the XML, right? So in this case, what I've done here is just so everyone can see. I've just basically made this an empty tag. And what that tells the system is, OK, you don't want any URL protocol handlers. And just to make it more exciting and risky, I've also removed all file type associations with Office. I wouldn't recommend you do this, but just for the demo, you can. And so this just illustrates the example, right? If you think about virtual application extensions in your kind of arsenal of tools to use at V, this is like the surgical scalpel, right? You can really tweak your applications to, in a very specific manner. So once you have this XML, what you can do is just go ahead and import and overwrite the configuration. So let's see. And it's done. That's it. I'll go back to my client machine. And again, got to do a publishing refresh. The refresh happened. Oh, but the refresh didn't go through because my packages are still in use. I need to shut them down. So let me go do that. So again, I'll just turn off Office. We need to do the same thing for Visio, because that was running in the connection group. So we'll do and I'll do stop. Oops, that's not stopping. Let's see. Oh, did I hit the wrong command? Wrong command. Packages are now stopped. Packages, Let's try running that again. Seems like those packages do not want to stop. I'm going to do one last thing. Yeah, I need to stop the connection group. So this is giving a FE client. This is not working. Star? Sorry. There we go. Sorry, I made this harder for myself. Star. I've got it. And they stop automatically. Thank you. And so now what I'll do is I'll bring up the client. It should come up in a second. There it is. Let's try this refresh one more time. And it's going to download that new deployment configuration that I've created. Doesn't seem to be. Was there? Say again? Oh, I didn't hit overwrite? Oh, jeez. Well, sorry, guys. Nice. As you can see, it's still open. Let's try that again. This box is just taunting me back and forth. It really is at this point. It's going to take a couple of seconds to get this one to come through, but it's thinking. Let's go. It's updating. Suspense. It should go through. There it is. Thank you, guys. I love this community. So you can see the FTAs are now gone. So obviously .docx no longer works. And if I go ahead and try to open up that contact us, it doesn't register anymore. So again, really, really powerful tool here. you can really tweak those subsystems. And again, this is a great way for having virtual applications work more natively, right? Because you can control how those virtual applications register with the native operating system. So we had URL protocols. We enabled, we disabled them. Again, I've kind of gone over how this demo works. Quick kind of best practice. So when should I use a virtual application extension? First of all, is the communication channel that the application is using, is it well defined? If we don't support the extension point, obviously don't use extensions. It's really about, if we support the extension point, does the OS or a native application need to see that extension point, need to interact with that application? Use virtual application extension. And again, a lot of the times, the sequence will just pick this up for you. Connection groups. This is really when virtual applications need to talk to other virtual applications. We recommend that you use connection groups in this instance. And last but not least, shared content store. So for those of you folks who are using VDI and have used our shared cache, it's all about storing all your applications centrally. So, and this is really in order to save disk space. In a VDI environment, typically you're using a SAN. Disk space is really expensive. We use the shared cache to really have all your virtual application clients execute from that central shared cache. But the key difference we're making in 5.0 is that applications can be updated per the usual process. So folks who have used our shared cache, you know kind of some of the steps you have to go through, rebooting, using that surrogate client. You don't have to do that anymore or at all with 5.0. So let me show you how this works. So I have this other client here. It's been doing publishing refreshes from the same server, but I've actually got this already in the shared content store mode, and it's working with our existing server that we'd be using in this demo. If you want to set up the shared content store, there's one step you have to do. At installation time, you have to configure one setting, or if you've already installed the client, what you can do is actually just do a call set at the client configuration, and there's a shared content store mode. Set that to 1. That's it. And so what happens when you use the shared content store? Well, this client has been talking to our management server, been doing publishing refresh, and has been launching applications. So for example, I'll just go ahead and launch Adobe Reader. It's up and running. But if you look at our disk, and remember, we use NTFS now, so we don't have that FSD file anymore. So if you just go to C program data, you'll see a folder called @v. All your packages are here. We've labeled them using the GUIDs. And this one I know is Adobe. And if I go in and I look at some files, let's say I go look at the help file, you can see here that while the file is actually 2.78 megs, the size on disk is only 4K, which is the allocation size of a file on NTFS. So all these files are being executed on the share. And remember, this is a share that's being used by my management server that's also talking to and working with AppV clients that are running in the normal mode. So from an IT administrator perspective, I have the same exact infrastructure, but VDI or normal mode, it doesn't make a difference. It's all the same. And just to, again, show you that this is real and I'm not just faking it. No one would do that. Oops, sorry. So let's go back to the other client. This client, which I had shown earlier, is just running in the normal traditional mode. If I launch Adobe Reader here, if I go look at this guy's share, which is, again, the same location. If I click on this file, it's using all 2.78 megs, right? So all your files are actually being downloaded and being used, whereas with the shared content store, it's all executing from the share. So that's great, but what does this mean? So this means if you want to upgrade a package, you just go ahead and upgrade a package normally, right? So if I go to my server, I've got Adobe Reader, but I've also got an upgrade of Adobe Reader. So I'll just go ahead and publish that. I'll go back. This is my client that's running in shared mode. The application's still running, so I'll shut that down. And I'll go do a refresh. And again, it's going to talk to the server, get the right metadata, and we should see the app update in a few seconds. And there you go. You see my shortcuts change because I'm now with a new version of Adobe Reader. And if I go ahead and if I launch it, you can see here if we go back to, if we go into the next version, you can see things like this DLL, for example. Again, it's normally 800K, but it's only 4K on disk because everything's being executed from that shared content store. So again, very powerful. We have the same capabilities we have of 4.6 shared cache, but it's just much easier to use. Again, this is sort of, I like to call it the anti-demo. It's notice what I didn't do, right? I didn't have to change anything, reboot any machines, or use a surrogate client. I just use my AppV infrastructure as I normally do. So a quick summary. I've shown you a lot of stuff. I always like to kind of think about AppV in terms of the sequencer client server. For the client, or in terms of the sequencer and packaging, configuration is important. Dynamic deployment configuration, dynamic user configuration. We've talked about that at extent for a while. Virtual application connection and virtual application extension are types of configuration that you can use to get virtual applications to behave more like native applications while still getting the benefits of virtualization. Also not listed here, obviously migration is important. We go to a new package format. We have a package conversion tool. On the client, I actually didn't even have a chance to mention this, but we now support group policy, so you can configure our client using group policy. Manage with PowerShell. Again, we have a talk about this tomorrow. We use standard Windows tools, so event logs, ETW tracing, and coexistence. I talked about this at the beginning, but you can now run 4.6 alongside 5.0 and kind of stagger your migration until you're all the way over to 5.0. The server, web-based, Silverlight. Again, we now support HTTP and SMB, so RTSP is no longer an option. And that's really the summary of AppV 5.0. There's one more thing I do want to touch upon, which is when we ask you to go and kind of invest in AppV, we're not asking you to invest just in our product, but also in our ecosystem. And one of the things we're happy to announce is that we are partnering with Adobe. I don't know if these guys are in the room, but cool. We're partnering with Adobe with their next version, and we're trying to get package accelerators out to you. And so that's really exciting. And so just to remind you guys that we are aware of the investment you guys make. We want to make the best product possible. We think 5.0 is the best version of AppV we've ever had. And we're also working on the ecosystem to give you the tools and the collateral to get your jobs done. These are some sort of resources for you. Obviously, we've had some contests. If you've got a UEV template or an AppV package accelerator, we have a contest going on where you can win an Xbox 360. We have various resources. I obviously want you guys to check out the AppV 5.0 beta. These are some sessions that we've got going on. Obviously, the first one is the one you're in. B338, which is tomorrow, which is around PowerShell. I highly recommend you check that out. It's really useful. For example, if you're in a demo and you don't know what happened to your client, sometimes your friends can help you out with your PowerShell. Migration and coexistence, I've talked about that. That's a great one to go to tomorrow. The UEV presentation was earlier today. If you didn't have a chance to check that out, get the recording. And then we have a lab as well that you should definitely go and come and see. And with that, the usual, complete the forms, please. Give us your feedback. And I'm happy to take questions. We have about 15 minutes. So if folks want to go to the mics, otherwise I can take questions as... Thanks, guys.
So can we get Adobe Professional working in the print driver with AppV yet?
Excellent question. Come up afterwards and we'll talk. Sure, go ahead.
I noticed you were using Office 2007
Yes.
for your demo. What's the status of the deployment kit for Office 2010, the proxies, and those other things that some of the pieces you showed today seem to take care of?
We're working with the Office team to get that deployment kit and get that support out, which is what you had in 4.6. We don't have anything to announce today, but we're working on getting that out to you guys. That's all I can tell you, unfortunately, right now. Any other questions? Feel free to come on up if you have any questions you'd like to ask. Thanks, guys.